Hello and welcome to this CodeBuddies.org live code hangout. Today we'll continue prototyping our Django caring app. It's kind of a care teams app. So far we don't have a name for it, but the current feature we're working on is here in a pull request to add the groups feature. And what it is a group of people will come together to assist with caregiving tasks for a friend or loved one, such as an elderly person who might need just a little bit of assistance living day to day at home. They're still independently living, not in a full-time nursing care situation, but they might need help going to the grocery store or doing house chores around the house, housework. So people will form these groups and create a list of activities and kind of participate in those activities, kind of divide it up to make sure the person is supported, and it's really clear who's responsible for what, because sometimes the assumption can be that somebody else will take care of it, and maybe nobody ends up helping out, and that person might feel isolated, might struggle with their day-to-day needs. So here is the project and pull request in the chat. So you can, if you're following along, you can see the files that have changed so far, and if or when this is merged, you'll see the sort of recipe that we're creating here. You can of course use this code in your own apps if you're creating a group app of any sort where you just want to have groups of people with invitations, etc. We'll be doing invitations later. Today we're going to be focusing on how to add a group. So that is the code. Here's the user interface on our local host. When you visit the groups route, you'll see a listing of all of the groups. Ideally, you'll only see groups that you're a member of, but for now it just lists everything. I'll fix that probably soon in this pull request perhaps. You can click to view the group details, and each group has a unique ID using a universally unique identifier so that it's very hard to guess. And the idea is that in this pull request at least, you're able to add members to groups, so far only in the Django administrative interface, and later we'll be working on the activities section. Now we do have some mockups. I can check those so you can see. Let me get the URLs here. I forget off the top of my head where. So let's see. Oh, here we are, mockup groups. So yeah, if I just come back here, I'll show you the individual group page because the mockup groups, and then we created a group for one resident, Jane. And essentially, this is what we're aiming for. You'll have a members listing and be able to essentially invite members. There's some nuance to this. I can't just let people necessarily select from a global list of all the users who may register for this app if we make it a public product or project, because that could really, expose personally identifiable information to strangers. So the idea is you'll know the email address of the people who, addresses of the people you want to invite. You can add those invitations and I'll figure out the nuances later, but essentially if there's already a user, they'll be notified in the app and possibly via email that you've invited them to the group, similar to the GitHub flow, essentially. Otherwise, it'll send out an invitation email to register, and this is non-trivial, so I think I'm going to wait a little bit on the invitation system. Similarly, activities is kind of non-trivial. At first, I'm going to do a very minimal activities list. You'll add an activity, you'll select from a pre-configured list of activity types, generic high-level things that people often can use assistance with: shopping, going to appointments, having social time, doing housework, running errands. And then members of the group can indicate that they would like to participate in that. Now, ideally, these will be going forward. They'll be future activities, not past activities. This is not so much an activity tracker as an activity coordination app. That's the main goal, is to get people proactively sharing care commitments for their friend or loved one. So that's the idea. Today we're going to add something that's not visible in the mockups, so we'll need to be able to create groups. So far we can do that through the admin section. I can create care groups here, but this is not meant for regular users. So how do we, as a regular user, add a group? Well, I think we'll have to refer to the Django docs, but what we'll do is create a form and a route to serve that, or this view can accept a post. So if I go to care groups, we have a view set up, care group detail view, and I could, in here I can create post, which will accept a form. I'll have to plan it out, or read actually while we're in this stream. So yeah, essentially I want to use this detail view. But perhaps override context. You know, I suppose separate paths could be fine here. We do create, update, potentially delete. And then, yeah, that makes sense. Not get too fancy with modal overlays or anything like that. Keep it very simple, minimum viable. So let's see. I see. So if we do implement a delete, we want to send them to the list. Okay, that makes sense. I'll come to deletion later. For now, let's do it. Create and update. For some reason, my code is not being formatted. Let's use black. However, I thought I had installed that with Poetry, didn't I? Let's see. Yeah, this is even used. For some reason, VS Code is not picking it up. Now we're in the correct virtual environment, so I'm not sure what to do. Manually format it, I suppose. All right, so we're gonna group, care group, create, and this is gonna be a create view, which has not been imported, but let's see if control period, no code actions available for that. Which is kind of weird. Generic edit. Let's copy this. Generic edit. And we're not going to use delete at this point. It's a bit dangerous model. Yeah, care group. Name, we'll add members later. You create the group and then you'll add members. One more. And you'll just do update. It's essentially the same, right? Let's see if we do this. Create. cool. Let's see what else. I do have my eye on chat over here just in case there's any questions or comments. I do enjoy talking about general programming concepts. Specific things relating to the project is also welcome. Or if you've got some projects you're working on, I'd like to hear about it. And if you've got an open source code base, we can check it out on the stream. All right, so now we're going to check our URLs. Make this a little bit smaller. And now we do have this prefixed, so when I register the URLs, we create a groups prefix on the core URLs. You can see here. So all these URLs will start with groups, so I don't need this entity in our URL path. Group add is fine. Well, create. It's going to be kind of consistent throughout. In our views, we have create. So I'm going to use that term in our route as well. Oh. Oh, looks like it's access right there. Some weird things are going on with this. Just go to Pylant's thing. Oh, because I've got a syntax error. I need to import it. So alphabetize these just to make them easier to find. Oops. I guess it didn't so much matter. So create. And oops. At this point, black would take this and make it a line. I would like to get black working. My document with black. Slug PK, yeah. Okay, group create. Okay, group create. So I want this. It looked like the cursor was there. Let me just see if I can get. That worked. Interesting. So maybe if I just. All right. Keep an eye over here on chat. I've got it right here in my peripheral vision, but it can be easy to overlook. Yeah, at this point, I'm going to get a little bit of tea. I'll be right back. All right, very cool. So need to add this form. I don't mind a shared one, but what do we need in the form? I think it's just form is B. Let's see. With the bootstrap. What are we looking for? The block. And let's see, in our accounts we use crispy forms. Let me just double check. This stuff eludes me, you know, I've got to look. I don't memorize this. Or it takes many. Yep, that was correct. Crispy forms tags, that makes sense. Okay, so we've got a form. And everything's wired up. So let's do, well, let's just test the URL directly, the path directly. So we go to groups, create. Yeah, it works. All right, so, and I need to add the submit button. All right, cool. Create a new character. But it's create or update. They're sharing the same template. All right. And yeah, these are not spectacular UI texts. I should be adding localization. I think it's just translation. If I do this at an early stage in the project, it'll save some time later. I would like to not be so English centric. I think it's just translate. Which would mean. Now, this is one thing, I don't know how to quite describe this succinctly, but I believe I was taught, at least, that translation should be kind of a context-based and not content-based in apps. In other words, this is a content-based translation. It says, translate this string. And if we ever use that string elsewhere in the app, then it'll have the same translation. But there are cases, and I don't know how much of an edge case, because I don't have deep experience with this, but coming from my previous project manager, Ty Bjorklund, who had more extensive localization experience, this translation should be situated in this context. So I should be defining translation key based on essentially the fact that we're in a care group form, and that we're then displaying this text edit. So it would be like care group form, edit care group text, or something like that. That way, if other places have a similar text, they can be distinguished from one another. And just translating a simple text like submit won't propagate through your entire application. It'll be, in a way, encapsulated, which is similar to the idea of we're converging on in web development of component-based development, where your styles and markup and things are scoped to more or less a component. And I think localization has a similar principle, but Django documentation doesn't. It recommends content-based localization, which I know it seems on the surface obvious that, yeah, you're localizing the text, but it's the text in the context, the text in place that needs to be localized. I'm sorry I don't have a more concrete example of context-based localization, like an edge case where it could be problematic, but just the idea is about containing the localization so it doesn't propagate through the entire application and change every instance of that word or phrase, which might kind of break the semantics based, because context matters essentially. But that said, I'm going to just go with content-based localization, and I don't know how difficult that would be to change, or if there's an article that more succinctly describes this and some of the rationales. I'm not even sure if that's the right phrase. I just kind of made it up. Yeah. Different kind of contexts. So, yeah, I don't know the general principle here that I'm trying to describe. There's, I'm sure, some literature on that. And we're going to have a submit button. This one where create might change. I mean, it seems obvious that create would always be translated as create, but even that one word, has synonyms that, based on the context, a synonym of create in a different language, especially it might, I think that's kind of what it starts to touch on it. It's that the word create is kind of broad, and when you move it into a different language domain, it might not make sense to create a loaf of bread. You might bake a loaf of bread, but you might create a widget, but bake a loaf of bread. But in English, maybe we don't have the distinction between create and bake, which is a contrived example. So we would use create in both places. But a localization that does have the distinction between create and bake, and I know there are languages that have words that are not in other languages, so to speak. Concepts like sisu is one in Sumomi that has apparently not so it's a direct translation into English. Aside from, I think I've learned of one, but doesn't come to mind. Yeah, so the idea is some languages or dialects might have more rich vocabulary in certain domains, and we wouldn't want to just be stuck with having the lack of a word in one language limiting the expressiveness of another language. All right, I think I kind of described it, but there we go. All right, so translate expected LF. So am I not using this correctly? So we're internationalizing it here, not localizing it. It's two sides of the coin. We're making this so that it can be translated. So that's internationalization. Localization is the act of translation and applying the translated text to the user display. All right, subtle, but Django's pretty well organized, apparently. Framework. All right. And that's another interesting thing about frameworks is not only, you know, they're sort of best practices or conventions, but they can also be very instructive. Like on, it's like an education, part of our education. These frameworks can teach us subtle distinctions, concepts, you know, patterns, which, you know, having a lack of a framework, you have to kind of invent your own patterns. And I know there's trade-offs, and not one library or framework pattern is applicable to every project, but certainly the Django framework has taught me a lot, continues to teach me a lot. I'm also starting to learn Flutter, and it's a very well designed UI framework, and I'm learning a lot there. So yeah, I believe frameworks have definitely taken my development up a notch in both productivity and just you know, education, I suppose. All right, so then we've got this form. And if I submit it, what happens? Nothing. Okay. So got form. We've got a submit button. Oh, right. I have to wrap it in form tags. Actually, give it an action. That's necessary. Oh gosh. I think it's going to be lowercase. The action can be left empty, button, submit. There we go. Let's see what happens now. All right, good. CSR token. Watching me flounder a bit. Speaking of learning, this is a good way to learn, making all these mistakes, which I should have made prior, probably a bunch of times, but to have learned these kind of lessons. Anyway, no shame in the game. Continue. So we'll create a form. Don't need to post it. A whole new form. Oh, right, it worked. Now if I go to groups, we got an ID. Boom. All right, and one thing is the group avatar. I'm just using a placeholder image and a little bit of group spacing. So now that we have two groups, I like them to display in columns. So that was one thing. Groups should have displayed in columns. So let's fix that bug. Group listing. I think I just need this. Default row calls. What the heck? 3? I do have this in my mockup. think is happening. These are colliding. My margin's not there. Well, let's look this up. I don't quite need the masonry, but the rows is what I'm after. Grid. I think I need some medium and small. Okay, so large could take up. It needs to go bigger. 6. That's perfect. Default. It needs to be larger. Okay. So for some reason, G is again, still learning all this stuff, but we got a row. We just use their example. Did we get some sane behavior again? Sane. Gutter. Okay, gutter is 4, so it's how much spacing is between them. So by default, this is how many column items, so not how many grid columns. I believe is what's going on here. names of the children, because there's that H one that's breaking the layout, I believe. That's where the confusion is coming in right here. Because I've wrapped this content block in a container to save some keystrokes, but I don't think that was the right move. I could make a page header block. Let's just see if this fixes the deal. Oh, that's the deal. Let's try it in Firefox over here off screen. No, it's the same problem. What am I doing wrong? Oh. Each card needs to be a column. There we go. Subtle, but yeah, that makes sense. I've got the row set up. It's looking good. Now, I kind of reverted to their example, but that's looking all right. Color. All right, now I want to edit this one. So let me get that. Let's check the route there. Should just be my URLs here. Haven't created it. I suppose groups, slug, edit, groups, edit, slug, groups, slug, edit. I think it'll be. Or update. It's a little easier to add update here, but I guess it's a little easier to see. Update. And really that 50 characters is kind of big. Right in the text. Yeah, looks all right. All right, so what did we do? 4, Wait. So I probably don't need to commit this, the row, the container. That should be. Fine, having the container in the parent. Let's refresh. Yeah. Of course, group name can be in any language. Content localization is distinct from code and framework localization. That's working. View, the view button. Now this should be translate. Could be 2 commits, but all right. All right, so we've got some named routes. Let's put some buttons in the thing so people can actually get to these. They can navigate here. I don't know if a button here is necessary, but maybe here. So actually, I do want a button here on the groups list. This is going to be a little bit challenging. I remember having buttons here might pose some difficulty. do a little bit of dancing around these special characters. I'm on a Nordic keyboard. Good. All right, this can actually be an anchor. Anchor. href equals URL. For okay, group create. So that works, and then the same principle. Update. And change the icon and such. Oops. Now, edit is a more natural word here. Pencil. So that didn't work. Oh, is all right. And the first ID is group dot ID, right? Yeah, so it works. Yeah, so same with the button. Little details, but yeah, just different context. So basically, object. So great. Save would be fine in both cases. Very cool. So this is actually now starting to come together as a more fully fledged app. Activities and invitations will be more complicated features. Yeah, and I'll have to look up how to do the group avatars if we even want them, but yeah, it makes it more personal. And let's go through and add a couple more localizations, texts that I saw were missing. Internationalizations, that is. So we've got activities was one. And members. Groups. Oh, I see it. Jeez. Subtle. I just. And I guess we can make a link to groups. All right, so go to navigation. Let's make a quick way that people can get to the groups. I might need to take a little break for lunch, but after lunch, I'm going to come back and work on some more features. My mouse battery is having some troubles. Also getting tired. I think it's just groups, wasn't it? Okay, group list. So I want the login and log out to be on the right and the nav bar nav to be on the left. But why is it not showing? I saved everything. Oh, I don't have a text to it. So you need that. Oh, there's nothing to click. so that just worked. Alright, so I'll have to change my mouse battery, get some lunch. I just need a rechargeable mouse. Or rechargeable batteries. I think maybe I'll get a battery charger. I'll take a walk and get a battery charger. I've been wanting to do that for a while. Oh man, come on. Or add groups link, how about that? Very cool. Looking good. My mouse is just annoying enough that I don't think I'll do a recap video. I'll do one at the end of the day. There will be more substantial changes, but this is good progress, good stopping point. So let's see if I can get my mouse over here. Good grief. To even stop the stream. All right, well, this has been a CodeBuddies.org live code hangout. If you're interested in getting involved with this or other live code or open source projects, stop by CodeBuddies.org. Thanks for your time. Have a great day, and I hope you and your loved ones stay well.